we welcome to the conference the Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Suella Braverman. Home Secretary, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. And Steve, I hope you can hear me.
Indeed, we can hear you loud and clear. And to coin the phrase, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you very much. It's an honour to join you all today. Let me start by saying that there is no greater privilege as Home Secretary than working with the heroic men and women of our police. And it's always deeply sobering and moving to hear the roll call of officers who have fallen in the line of duty in the past year. Words cannot do justice to the debt we owe them, nor to how keenly we feel for their colleagues and loved ones. And as Steve mentioned, I have personally been incredibly moved by attending the National Police Memorial Day in Cardiff only a few weeks ago, and also hosting the nominees for the Police Bravery Awards in Downing Street in London earlier this year. Those heroes will be forever cherished. I support your campaign for a medal for heroes. There is a consensus across government that this needs to happen, and I hope we will be able to announce something very soon. It's my job to enable you to do your jobs. That's why my colleague, the Policing Minister, Chris Philp, and I have taken the scissors to red tape. We listened when you said that you were spending too much time filling in forms, and I'm pleased to be working with the MPCC on reforming the rules. Because by changing the rules around how crime is recorded, we could free up around 100,000 hours that could be put to better use. There was no need to record 2 crimes when dealing with stalking, harassment and controlling or coercive behaviour, nor to record Section 5 public order crimes when, on too many occasions, officers arrived only to find an empty street and no disorder. It was right, for bureaucratic reasons and in the cause of free speech, to ensure that a malicious communication crime will be recorded only if a criminal threshold has been clearly reached, and not just when someone claims to be offended. Now, I'm not fighting my campaign against political correctness in policing only for the sake of the law-abiding majority, who want to see officers patrolling the streets, not policing pronouns on Twitter. I also know that that's what the majority of you signed up for too. Recruiting more than 20,000 additional officers and having a record number of officers in England and Wales is just the start. But you need clarity from political leaders, and I could not be clearer. I believe in the Peelian principles of policing. I believe in investigating every crime, and I believe in keeping the public safe by catching criminals. Anything that distracts from this is unwelcome, whether that's enforcing non-existent blasphemy laws, unnecessarily recording a non-crime hate incident, or joining in with political demonstrations. Now, I understand that you, as officers, must make difficult operational decisions, but the public expects more than just a crime number. They want to see the police taking visible action in communities and thoroughly investigating crime. I'm therefore delighted that the police have agreed to follow all reasonable lines of inquiry for all crime types. And when I visited Greater Manchester Police, I saw how Chief Constable Steve Watson transformed that force by following that approach. So I expect to see significant improvements in the way the police approach crimes like phone theft, car theft, shoplifting and criminal damage in order to solve more crimes and restore public confidence in local policing. Crime investigations should not be screened out solely on the basis that they are perceived as minor, and all crimes merit investigation where there is a reasonable line of inquiry to follow up. I'm also pleased that the police have all committed to attending the scene of every domestic burglary. It's a terrible crime which causes misery and fear for victims. Nor must we ignore the havoc wreaked by antisocial behaviour. And the government's action plan takes the fight to perpetrators, including through the dispensation of immediate justice. And I was pleased to visit Essex Police and Derbyshire Police to see the rollout of some of the pilots. Neighbourhood policing is the bedrock of keeping the public safe and making sure they feel safe too. We must never forget that the fear of crime inhibits people hugely and diminishes the ability of communities to flourish. So we need to continue to build trust between the police and the public. It's crucial that the police are accessible and accountable to communities. I'm grateful to PCCs and Chief Constables throughout England and Wales for sharing with me their plans to improve confidence in local policing and police visibility. And I'll digest all of this and look forward to receiving the results of these plans next March. We also listened when you said that officers were having to spend too much time taking responsibility for people suffering mental health crises. Make no mistake, mental health care really matters. This is about getting the right professionals to undertake the right tasks. July saw the announcement of the new National Partnership Agreement, which will see a right care, right person model rolled out throughout England, having been thoroughly achieved in Humberside. Humberside Police estimate that this system has saved them over 1,400 hours per month of police time. And similar results across the English forces could save around 1 million hours. The police will only be expected to attend mental health incidents if there is a real and immediate risk of serious harm or where there may be criminal activity. Because the truth is, anyone suffering a mental health crisis needs the right support in the most appropriate setting. That's not a police cell. Meanwhile, the Public Order Act has given the police greater powers and legal clarity for combating disruptive protests, which have caused such chaos and eaten up so much police time and money. Now, I will always back tried and tested ways of driving down crime. We've trialled serious violence reduction orders, which allow the police to stop and search those with convictions for knife crime to see if they are carrying a weapon. Earlier this year, I saw for myself how well this is working in Merseyside. And this government has made it easier than ever before for the police to make legitimate use of their stop and search powers. At the same time, we've made the use of such powers more transparent and accountable. And so, following a consultation earlier this year, the government will introduce a ban on certain types of large knives, such as zombie-style knives and machetes. We'll legislate when parliamentary time allows. And from a personal perspective, having met knife crime campaigners in several forces, for example in Hertfordshire, I've seen the impact that knife legislation can have on saving lives. Now, technology is vital to enable you to achieve operational success, whether it's in Kent, where they are pioneering the use of technology to support domestic abuse victims, or in South Wales Police through the use of facial recognition technology. And I want to ensure that you have the best technology available. Taser is a valuable tool for the police. And I've received a request from police leaders to approve a new Taser device, the T10, for use in the UK. I want you to have the very best kit available. And so I hope to be able to approve the T10 after testing by scientists next year. My officials will also continue to review markets to identify any new suppliers and ensure the best technology and the best value for money. Now, since March 2010, Neighbourhood crime, including burglary, robbery, and vehicle-related thefts, are down by 51%, and violent crime down by 46%. So we, collectively, are making real progress in tackling high-harm crimes. And I thank you for your work. But there are always tragic reminders that a life can be snatched away in an instant. So as part of the government's commitment to tackle homicide, I will work with the police this winter to put particular focus on the prevention of homicides involving men aged over 25 killed in public. Because too often we've heard about a group of friends on a night out over Christmas ending in tragedy, with an argument escalating into a one-punch homicide. We are investing in the police's national communications campaign to raise awareness of the danger of this appalling phenomenon, and in local police-led activity to make pubs, other licensed premises, and the nighttime economy safer this winter. Now, another atrocious crime is rape. Getting police officers with the right skills is critical in the effort to progress and effectively manage these cases. Operation Soteria has highlighted the importance of specialist knowledge. The national operating model is now being implemented by all police forces in England and Wales. This innovative approach has brought about real change in the pioneering force, Avon and Somerset. It's given officers better tools to improve their decision-making processes. And I've heard firsthand from those supporting victims locally how Chief Constable Sarah Crew's force is ensuring victims' needs and rights are front and centre. 2,000 police investigators will receive new specialist training in rape and sexual offences by next April. And it will be compulsory for all new recruits to undertake rape and sexual offences training. Rape is one of those crimes that make your job incredibly demanding emotionally and psychologically. It cannot be repeated often enough that you do a job that makes unique and enormous demands upon you. And I'm determined that the government does all it can to support you. The Police Covenant is this country's promise to you and to your families that we will do right by you. Its creation was a vital step, but it's only a starting point. Supporting police officers is an ongoing project that requires constant vigilance, and I promise that I will always listen to you very carefully. We're grateful to the Federation for your support of the National Policing Board, championing police welfare and other frontline issues. Police treatment centres play a vital role in providing essential help to those of you who suffer physical or mental injury as a result of your service. The Federation has raised concerns with the way police treatment centres are funded, and we've asked the National Police Wellbeing Service to conduct a review of the PTCs to understand the demand on the service and how to best support and utilise it. It's perfectly understandable that you are worried about levels of fatigue in policing and its effect on your well-being. Long, irregular, and uncertain hours doing an exceptionally demanding job are inevitably challenging. But that doesn't mean we should just accept that it will take a terrible toll. Police officers are so admirable precisely because you are human beings and not robots. I'm interested in the phase 2 of the fatigue project led by the National Police Wellbeing Service in partnership with Liverpool John Moores University. It will be incredibly helpful to see the results, with 10 to 12 forces due to take part. I'm very grateful to the volunteers, officers from a number of high fatigue frontline roles, such as investigators, response and firearm teams. The government is funding this project as part of the Police Covenant. It uses the latest biometric technology anonymously to capture fatigue levels and deliver an expert-led 120-day programme to support officers with fatigue recovery. It's a unique research project not just in UK policing, but in the world. And we're already seeing significant improvements in those involved in the study, with improved sleep, reduced fatigue, and better recovery. Likewise, as part of our police covenant, next month we will see the launch of the first national family support package through Oscar Kilo, the National Police Wellbeing Service. It includes a range of advice and practical tips for family health, nutrition, and sleep, as well as a book that helps to explain to children what policing is all about. I'm very grateful to the Police Federation for your input into this work. The demands placed on police officers are unique. That's why the support for you must be bespoke. Mental health matters just as much as physical health. Indeed, mental ill health can, tragically, claim lives, as some of you know all too well. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce that we will provide additional funding to set up a 24/7 mental health crisis support line for current and former members of the police workforce. There are employee assistance programs in a number of forces with telephone counselling available, but there is no national 24-hour, 7-day-a-week suicide prevention line. That needs to change. Fire and ambulance have recently established their own 24/7 crisis lines. The police need and deserve no less. So as I said at the Conservative Party conference earlier this month, I want to ensure that when police are called upon to use force or conduct pursuits in the line of duty, officers are able to use their powers with legal certainty and clarity. That's why I've announced a review to report to me by the end of the year to ensure that the legal and operational frameworks in which they operate are robust and command the confidence of officers and the public. I want you to know that I've heard your concerns that you are not being treated fairly and that processes overlap and take too long. Steve, you mentioned pay. I was very pleased that we were able to give police officers a 7% pay rise. We are in a tough economic climate, but prioritising a rise for some of the most selfless, outstanding professionals among us was absolutely right. Decent police officers suffer hugely when a minority falls short of the standards required. And in recent years, some have fallen spectacularly short. The culture in policing does need significantly to improve. That is one of the areas of focus of part 2 of the Angelini inquiry. The National Centre for Police Leadership, being developed by the College of Policing, is another big step forward. Now, I know that every responsible police officer accepts that they must be held accountable for their actions. It was right to take action to make it easier for chief constables to remove officers who are not up to the job. Right for the public and right for the majority of officers who do the job bravely and well and who need to be able to rely on their colleagues. Nor does our duty to you end when you leave the force. The last thing I want is for you to be left adrift. In order to help you transition out of policing when the time is right for you and your family, the College of Policing has developed a Levers Toolkit to be launched later this year. It will provide practical support such as training and guidance on CV writing and interview skills. That said, your chiefs have the option to bring back officers after you have retired under the MPCC Retire and Rejoin guidance. Leveraging talent and expertise back into our police force is highly desirable. And I encourage all chiefs to think carefully about the balance of their workforce and make sure they are making use of this option to retain the experience and skills the force needs. You have chosen a job that is never easy, but it's also immensely worthwhile. Indeed, it is essential. The the consequences of not having a world-class police force are too terrible to contemplate. And so my final message is a simple one. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you.
Home Secretary, thank you for that. We are going to get straight into some questions. Just before we do, you mentioned pay. Within that, you mentioned the 7% rise. Do you think police officers are paid a fair wage?
Well, I was very pleased to announce in July that the government had accepted the Police Remuneration Review Body's recommendation to award the consolidated increase of 7% to all ranks up to and including Assistant Chief Constables and Commanders with effect from the 1st of September this year. And I believe that that does reflect the commitment, the hard work and the economic climate within which we are working. It's been it's a large pay increase. It was something that we did as a government to reflect our gratitude and appreciation for what officers on the front line do.
So 7% is enough?
Well, in line with the recommendation from the independent review body, it has been deemed to be enough, and that's why the government has accepted that recommendation. Given the tight economic climate that we're in, the challenging fiscal situation that we're in, it is something that we value and we hope has been appreciated by police officers.
Steve, has it been appreciated?
10%. For me, it's 10% short of where our own research from the Social Market Foundation said it should be, 17% behind. While 7% was a good start in the step in the right direction, it's 10% short from where we need to be.
And Home Secretary, does that mean that when do you look at this again? I mean, I know these things are always sort of described as ongoing, and of course we can at some point in the future take another look. But of course, the not unreasonable case that the police make is that if you factor in inflation, if you factor in lack of pay rises in previous years, that we're actually talking about a loss here, not an increase.
Well, if you look at the last report from the pay review body, it found that in the financial year ending March 2022, the median full-time gross annual earnings for police officers was 32% higher than the whole economy, 32% higher than associate professional occupations, and 5% higher than other professional occupations. So I think that was the independent assessment, providing comparative analysis. And listen, I fully accept there are cost of living challenges at this current time. There are economic challenges. The government's working very hard to bear down on inflation, to grow the economy and to support those in our frontline services. But that's why we were pleased to accept the independent recommendation from the pay review body.
Here's a question that came in from Joseph, who says, Home Secretary, the up-and-coming changes to the police misconduct procedure, namely give chief officers the power to dismiss officers found guilty of gross misconduct. This is unfair. Why replace a system that worked very well and had independent chairs? Is this not a step in the wrong direction?
Well, we are cognizant of the fact that there has been confidence in policing has been rocked recently, and it must be restored. That's why it's incumbent on all of us within the policing community, within government, to be forward-leaning in reforming a system that has not worked for many years. We hold chiefs to account for the culture and the standards in their forces, and therefore it's important that chiefs have a leading role in determining who should be dismissed. We've seen cases where chiefs have been powerless to dismiss officers who have committed gross misconduct and should not be in policing, let alone being deployed. But it's also crucial to maintain a vital element of independence in the system, which is why we are retaining independent lawyers and lay members on misconduct panels. And we believe that this strikes the right balance in restoring confidence in the system, but also ensuring fairness.
Steve, does it seem fair to you?
It doesn't, and all the evidence, as we heard yesterday from John Bassett when we had the session around it, the figures are comparable. They are dismissing the same number of people as before. It's in accordance with the current guidance and the training they've got. So for us, this is a backward step. It's a kangaroo court system again. And indeed, as I said, I think it was yesterday or this morning around, when you speak to some chief constables, they don't want to have that responsibility. They're quite happy with the current situation that it is, to stick to legally qualified chairs, a senior police officer from their own force that makes part of that panel, and an independent member of the public. The system is working. If the guidance needs changing at what level they start at before dismissal, let's review the guidance. And I wouldn't blame LQCs if they walked away from the system going, we're not responsible anymore. If chief constables want that ability to sit on a panel, they must sit on the panel, not depute it. If they want the power to hire and fire, they must sit there. So for us, we will disagree. We don't think this is the right step at all.
Would that, Home Secretary, would that not be a happy compromise, if you like, get the chiefs onto the panels?
Well, I think, we have been looking at this system for a while now, and we're committed to providing all the necessary powers to the police that they need to protect the public. And in January, I launched a review of the police officer dismissals process. We took evidence and we considered the system extensively. On the back of that review, we've now made a decision to reform the hearings process, including handing responsibility for chairing the hearings back to senior police officers. But we will still retain crucial elements of independence in the system, with independent lawyers and independent panel members supporting the chair on the panel. And chief constables will be further supported in rooting out those officers who aren't fit to serve through several new measures. There'll be a presumption for dismissal for those found to have committed gross misconduct. Previously, it's taken a huge and burdensome process to get to root those people out. There'll be clarification of the route to dismiss those who fail vetting. There'll be a presumption for former officer and special constables cases to be heard under the fast-track processes by senior officers, and there'll be a streamlined performance system. So we've thought holistically, we've thought about independence, and we've thought about fairness. I do believe where we've ended up ticks all of those boxes.
We had a lot of questions come in on medals for heroes. You did allude to that in the early part of your speech. Lee Godfrey says, Home Secretary, in your speech you said you support medals for heroes in the campaign and the introduction of the Elizabeth Medal to posthumously recognise emergency service workers killed on duty. I know I'm asking the question that Bryn Hughes wants an answer to. Bryn, we spoke to just before lunch. His daughter, GMP officer, was killed on duty some years ago. Can you explain why this is taking so long to introduce?
Well, let me just put again on record my condolences, my gratitude and admiration to those families who have lost loved ones in the service of policing. Their loss is unimaginable. And our police exhibit professionalism, dedication, heroism, commitment, care in discharging their duties day in, day out. I recognise that. And I know that they risk their lives in unimaginable ways, more ways than most of us will ever know. When it comes to introduction of the specific medal that you refer to, any recommendation for a new form of award requires careful consideration and is ultimately a decision made by royal warrant confirmed by the monarch. And the Committee of the Grant of Honours, Decorations and Medals advises the monarch on such issues. Now, we have been involved in a process led by the Cabinet Office and other departments for more formal recognition in the way that I've set out in my speech that might be given in the event of the loss of life in the line of duty, to sit alongside the existing arrangements for gallantry and bravery. I hope to be in a position to announce more very soon.
So you're on this particular issue, you're waiting for the nod from the palace, as it were?
There is as I said, there's not much more I can provide in terms of detail over the process, but I hope to make an announcement soon.
It is one of, I mean, you can understand, I think a lot of the guys agitating for this, but this has gone on for a number of years and arguably predates your time in office as well. But I mean, to the objective outsider, you'd think, you know, I appreciate that changing government policy is like turning an oil tanker around. I get that. However, something like this, you might imagine, look, it's a medal. It's a posthumous medal. There's no one on the planet that's going to argue against this. It will be a case of you saying, well, I'm the Home Secretary. Yeah, of course we can have a medal for this. Away we go. You look like somebody who believes in this medal, so why can't we have it?
Listen, it's a cross-government process. Many other departments are involved in the process. We are working through that process, and I urge a little bit more patience, but I hope to be in a position to make an announcement soon.
Steve, a bit more patience?
I was really hoping for an announcement today. You know, we've got Bryn Hughes who's made the travel over. You know, it would be so much to our colleagues, especially when we look at the people that were involved at National Police Memorial Day a couple of weeks ago. It would have been a gift to policing today, Home Secretary. If you could have announced that, it would have been something special. Naturally, I'm disappointed on behalf of the families of those that have bereaved, lost loved ones. You know, it's, for us on the outside, it seems relatively simple. Let's get this done. We had COVID changes at the click of fingers. We've had changes to misconduct regulations coming very, very quickly, and yet this seems to be in a too difficult box. It's very frustrating. Yeah.
Home Secretary, you look, don't dwell on this too much, but you look like somebody who's like on the precipice of announcing something here. Would that be fair?
You're tempting me down a line, Ian, that I'm going to resist. I cannot make a formal announcement today. I very much hope I'll be in a position to do so soon.
OK, let's move on to a firearms question. And understandably, under the circumstances and recent events, there have been many of those. Simon Payne says, Home Secretary, given the unique and difficult circumstances, what message do you have for firearms officers and their families? And this, of course, comes on the back of some pretty high-profile cases, most of which we cannot talk about, obviously. But the more general point that is made there is, what message do you have for those officers?
Well, it is absolutely crucial that police officers are able to use their powers with legal certainty and clarity when they are needed. And that's why I've announced a review to report to me by the end of the year to ensure that the legal and operational frameworks within which the police operate are robust and that they command the confidence of both officers and the public. So I hope to be again in a position to announce changes if necessary and if appropriate very, very soon. I appreciate the very high level of concern that many officers have about this issue.
When you have officers, as we saw, this anymore, this has become, I didn't go out there to have to make calculations into the future about all manner of politicised issues when I take to the streets to look for the bad guys. Do you sympathise with those officers who took that action?
Listen, firearms officers do an extremely challenging job in circumstances involving excruciating pressure, fast-moving situations, and life-threatening scenarios. Again, unimaginable for those lay people like us. So they protect the rest of us by carrying firearms. They have specialist and rigorous training, and we are very grateful for all of the work they do. And I don't want a framework that has a chilling effect on them, whereby they do not exercise those legitimate powers in the name of public safety or law enforcement because they feel that they won't receive adequate protection if they're acting lawfully. That's why we've got the review. And let's also be clear about what we're dealing with. Lethal force continues to be used very, very rarely by the police in this country. That's a testament to the training, the skill, and the judgment of our firearms officers. That they use lethal force incredibly judiciously, and the training that they receive is incredibly rigorous. They're under a lot of monitoring and scrutiny. So I'm mindful of that context, but I want to ensure that the legal framework protects them in the best possible way, but also commands the confidence of the public.
Steve, this is an area you know incredibly well. Just a response to the Home Secretary on that and the wider issues surrounding this what has now become a very delicate and controversial area of policing.
It is, and I'll be careful sort of the words I use, bearing in mind cases that are currently ongoing. It's encouraging to get the review in the first place. None of my firearms colleagues, nor any police officer, is afraid of scrutiny. We want good, balanced, transparent, open investigations. But as I've articulated on quite a few occasions now, is that when these incidents take place and the trigger is pulled, be it a fatal or otherwise, there's a very thorough post-incident process that takes place. And usually, within 6 to 8 hours, an initial account has been given. That's given to the Independent Investigation Authority. Within 48 to 72 hours, a completely full account has been given. That will include access to body-worn video, in-car dash cam, local CCTV. The package is given. There's nothing to hide. What all my colleagues want is to be able to know they can do their job properly and professionally without worrying before they use their use of force. And this doesn't just extend to firearms officers. This now extends to every officer who may use force, or indeed senior officers who authorise an operation which will likely use force. So it's encompassing everybody now, and it's that reassurance that when they do their job, they get looked after properly, professionally. We're there as the Federation to support them with legal advice and support going through the cases, but it's not unreasonable to have that security to know that they're going to get a good, solid investigation that backs them and a good decision-making process at the other end with any future decisions. And
Home Secretary, the point that also Steve made in his speech, which I think by any measure is many would see as a rather perverse position where an officer has discharged a firearm, it has resulted in a fatality. All the legal hurdles were cleared, that officer was acting in accordance with all the rules, all the regulations, totally in the line of duty, nothing to see in that respect. And yet the IOPC come along and say, no, sorry, there's a little bit more to do on this one yet. I mean, that cannot, and you can understand why officers would make this argument, be acceptable.
Well, let me also be clear, I'm not going to make any comment on any specific case, and there are ongoing litigation currently. But we have listened very carefully to police concerns about the scrutiny processes and the other routes of challenge which surround police use of force, and we are and including pursuits, and the review will consider those aspects amongst many others, and we're working with the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's Office to complete the terms of reference.
Here's a question from Wayne Thielman, who says, I'm a police constable with 29 years service. I've enjoyed the majority of this. However, if I could go back 30 years, I'd be telling my 20-year-old self not to join the police. With the same view held by many hundreds of experienced officers, as Home Secretary, how does it make you feel hearing that?
Well, obviously, Phil, that's disappointing to hear that that's the advice that you would give your younger self. It doesn't tally with the experience that I have of meeting many of the new recruits to policing as part of our successful Uplift programme, where you, police forces around the country, have successfully recruited a new generation of police officers. 20,000 new officers have joined the ranks from all sorts of backgrounds, with all types of experiences, ready, willing, passionate, energetic, and dedicated to public service. And whenever I meet those new recruits, I tell them it's a privilege. It's a privilege and an honour to wear the badge. You occupy a leadership role in your communities, but also in your country. People will look to you in their gravest hours of need, fear, tragedy, and it will be you who will potentially save their lives, change the course of their lives. And that is a great honour. It's a great, great honour. And wear it with pride. Not everyone makes it through the hoops to wear that badge. It's a great honour, and I think it's noble work that everyone does in this profession. And I'm constantly inspired and re-inspired by the new recruits who are coming energetically into the ranks every day.
And I'm sure that is echoed by many people, but you must be aware that there is a level of discontent that perhaps we've never seen before. It's not just around pay and conditions. It's about, you know, who has an officer's back. It's about pensions. It's about mental health issues. It's about a very splintered system in many respects. There's a lot of bureaucracy, despite some of the announcements you made in your speech. There's a lot more to the job than there ever was, and that is becoming, for many officers, completely unpalatable. It's no longer the job they joined up for.
I think there's no doubt about it that policing has become more challenging. There are greater responsibilities on the police. There is more scrutiny. But there's also greater support, I think, and good outcomes. As I said, over the last 10 years, overall crime has fallen by 50%. Now, that is thanks to the great work that the police have been conducting over that decade. And yes, of course, there is more to do. There is never room for complacency, and there are many, many challenges and areas that we need to still keep focusing on and working incredibly hard on. But even the Chief Inspector himself in his recent report said England and Wales are arguably the safest that they've ever been. That's thanks to the work and good practice that policing has demonstrated over the last 10 years. So there is, I believe, there are greater tools available to the police. This government has introduced greater powers for the police, greater funding. We've increased pay. I know, Steve, you will say it's not enough, and that's fair enough, but we have increased pay, and we are working hard to make your professional lives easier in some of the ways I've set out in my speech, but also in terms of the time you're spending in A&E with a mental health patient who really should be more appropriately cared for in a health setting, or whether it's in the reporting rules and the Home Office counting rules, stripping out hours of burden and bureaucracy from your lives, or whether you mentioned redaction. Ever since I was Attorney General, I've been passionate about reducing the burdens on police officers when it comes to redaction. I've visited police forces and I've spoken to police officers at all ranks, and they've told me, and I've been incredibly frustrated when I've heard it, they spend 8-9 hours in front of a computer screen redacting pages of documents or CCTV footage. They didn't sign up to do that. That's not what their expertise is designed for. And that's why, with the policing minister, we are working to reform that. And I'm absolutely determined to fix that redaction issue so that you're not stuck behind a computer screen for hours dealing with an administrative task, which really shouldn't be your job.
We did a whole session on redaction just yesterday, and maybe you're going to tell me it's another one of those government oil tanker moments where, you know, to turn this around on the face of it looks very simple. I mean, you are the Home Secretary. Can you not just make this happen? Sit down there with a CPS, have a bit of a chinwag, a nice cup of tea, and say, look, about this redaction issue, it's a little bit too cumbersome, it's too bureaucratic. Can we change it now?
We have had those meetings without tea, but we've definitely had several meetings. And indeed, as I said, when I was Attorney General overseeing with superintendent's responsibilities for the Crown Prosecution Service, it was a live issue then. And we worked with the Director of Public Prosecutions to simplify DG6 and the Attorney General's guidance on relevant to redaction and disclosure. I think we can go further. And that's why we're working with the MPCC, we're working with police leaders and frontline operational experts to tell us what needs to change so that we get that operational bubble, as you described, Steve. That would be that's my aim. You know, CPS and the police are on the same side, effectively, and why you know, reams of documents need to be redacted before they are being presented in the public domain or in trial. I'm not sure that strikes the right balance, and that's one of the issues that we are looking at.
The grim revelation there that the CPS can't afford tea as well. Who knew? Steve, just on the wider point that we were discussing to begin with there, the issue of discontent among officers, and that's been reflected. There's another one here. Sam Wong says, I'm seeing trends of officers leaving, emigrating to places like Australia and Canada, who are offering lucrative deals to steal our trained and experienced staff. Has any work been done to look at this and the reasons why? I mean, just feed into that, Steve, if you would, and on the back of that previous question about officers just not feeling as they would have done when they first signed up.
Yeah, things have changed hugely, and some of it comes, for me, down to accountability. As you look at all the current issues in policing, there isn't a single senior police leader that's been held to account for the failings in the last decade. That's unacceptable. We heard on day one, we talked about accountability and leadership, or the lack of leadership. It's always the junior ranks, the lower ranks, the PCs, the sergeants, the inspectors, the chief inspectors that get blamed for the failings in policing. But what about the very senior officers, the chief constables, the assistant chief constables, the deputies, the commanders, the superintendent ranks that make some of the decisions that we all have to work with? Where's the accountability there? We look at some of the most serious cases that have made the headlines, and only a PC or a DC has been held to account. Where's the organisational responsibility to make sure those things that we've challenged as the Federation, seeking better vetting, seeking better time limits, seeking change in the law to support us, everything reasonable has not been there. They're not being held to account. If we had leaders that actually led us properly and did their job, we'd have confidence that might stop the flow of people going to Australia, where it's warmer, better paying conditions, better acceptance and more respect. So the buck stops with them. They're the leaders. They're the ones that take us through the service. They are letting us down hugely.
This feeds a little into some of that as well. Matt Curzon says, why does the government keep telling the public that they've recruited 20,000 extra police officers when all you've actually done is replace those cuts since 2010? Isn't the truth that there are effectively no new officers to deal with a growing population in terms of numbers? And again, Matthew feeds into this. Home Secretary, are you at all worried about the dramatic increase in the number of police officers voluntarily resigning over the last 2 years? And if so, have you asked yourself why there is an increase in that? So, yes, technically, if you look at the paperwork, the data says those officers that the government cut originally have been replaced, but overall numbers, given that there are resignations in a way that we haven't seen for a long time, suggests a very wide or a different story, Home Secretary.
Well, you know, whilst I accept there were challenging times following 2010, I don't accept that we're just, you know, backfilling. There's actually, as I said, a record number. So that's the highest number ever in the history of policing in England and Wales. So you know, the previous peak was 146,000 officers in post. That was March 2010. We are now just shy of 150,000. So we have exceeded the previous peak. I would also say that in that decade, we've seen population increase, but we've seen overall crime fall. So again, that demonstrates that actually, notwithstanding population increase, we have seen a more efficient and effective policing response, given the over 50% fall in overall like-for-like crime in that same period. When it comes to in terms of, you know, investment in our police, we are developing the resources for leadership and talent, and we've invested into a national centre for police leadership, which is being developed by the College of Policing. That's going to set new national standards for leadership at every level, and development programmes aligned to those objectives are actually available now. But I'm very, very keen to really bolster the investment in our existing cohort to ensure that you have the skills to progress in your careers, to move ahead, and to develop your leadership skills so that you are proud to stay in the force, and you are role models for those who are joining. And then lastly, you mentioned those who are leaving. Well, the leavers figure as of March 2023 covers all types of leavers, and more than 2/5 of those were officers who were retiring. It's about 43%. And voluntary resignation rates at around 3% are low compared to other sectors. So we've got 3% of all leavers are actually voluntarily departing from the force, comparable with other sectors.
Just out of interest, had you been Home Secretary in 2010, would you have got rid of 20,000 officers?
Listen, it's very easy, isn't it, to look back through rose-tinted glasses and with the benefit of hindsight. We inherited a parlous economic situation in 2010. There were incredibly challenging situations when it came to challenging restraints and conditions for our economic and public spending decisions. So the decisions which were made in 2010, I believe, were the right ones. They were right for those circumstances.
Even getting rid of 20,000 officers.
What I'm focused on now is I'm proud of the achievement, the promise that we made in 2019 to recruit 20,000 new officers. We did that. In fact, we've got a record number, and I'm focused on delivering better policing, better conditions, and better services into the future. I mean,
I'm no economist or politician. I'm a gob on a stick, if you like, in that respect. But a lot of people would say, hang on a second, you got rid of 20,000 and then replaced 20,000. That just seems curious mathematics by any standards and slightly counterproductive.
But as I said, we've actually surpassed. It's not as simple as that, Ian. We surpassed any peak that was previously achieved. So we've gone beyond. Yes, we've filled the recruitment shortages that we had, but we've also surpassed and gone beyond and now have a record number. We've exceeded any peak that has been achieved in the past. So that's why I do take issue with the point that you're making.
Okay.
We've recruited this record number. We now have a record level of resources, and we want to now deploy those resources in the best possible way that meets the public's priorities.
I think a lot of officers sense that the legacy of that era is still very much being felt now. Let's move on to another question from Raphael, who says, Home Secretary, you say that neighbourhood policing is the bedrock of policing. Police officers are currently struggling with an overbearing demand and unimaginable workloads, and you're demanding that we investigate every crime. We are prioritising the risk and still struggling. How do you propose to improve the current structure to achieve your goal of investigating every single crime?
It's a great question, and the reason why I know that this is not about our announcement on reasonable lines of inquiry was a landmark agreement that we reached with all police forces to make a commitment to follow up every reasonable line of inquiry, because the public have become incredibly frustrated and felt let down with instances when their car has been stolen, when their house has been burgled, when they've been a victim of a mugging or robbery, and they've called the police, and there's been some CCTV footage, and there's been a insufficient response from the police, and leads and actionable evidence haven't been followed up upon. And so we're responding to a real call from the British people for a more robust response. And we haven't plucked this idea out of thin air. We've based it on what's worked in the past. In Greater Manchester Police, Chief Constable Steve Watson inherited a force which was in special measures, and on day one of his appointment, he set out a very simple but powerful plan. And one of the elements of that plan was a commitment to follow every reasonable line of inquiry. And in a very short space of time, some 18 months to 24 months, he turned around the performance of that force, he increased public confidence levels, and he took it out of special measures. He did that without asking for extra resource, without asking for extra money, but he did that through greater streamlining, cutting out the time-wasting activity, and coordinating response at the top of the force. And following every reasonable line of inquiry was a key element to how he turned around Greater Manchester. And what I say to forces is if he can do it in Greater Manchester, then we can all do it.
Steve, response to that?
It's a great idea, follow all reasonable lines inquiries, but it's not working. I was a victim of crime about a month ago in my own force, the Metropolitan Police Service. They didn't follow reasonable lines of inquiry. There was a great chance to capture forensics from inside the car. It didn't happen. I got a crime number, I apparently had a phone call, and that was it, nothing. Disappointed in my own force. So, forgive me, Home Secretary, while it's a great standard, it's not being done. And cops just do not have the time because there are so many calls, the volume of crime out there. And we look at figures, and it may well have been a record number of police officers in the service. Using their own figures from March 2023, I think it was just over 9,000 people left the service in a year. That's the highest number ever. Those figures also for the total number of police officers in the service. We're backfilling for the police staff, who are just as vital and crucial to police to cover their jobs as well. So if we take the figures of 9,000 last year, let's do a rough average now. Since we've had that high point of the 155,000 police officers in total in policing, we've probably lost 4.5, nearly 5,000 since then. So we almost did an uplift every year just to maintain what we've got. It's not working.
So what is going wrong here? The Home Secretary said there, crime is down from 2010. Officer numbers are up. Are people... What is happening here then? Why... A casual onlooker would say, well, hang on a second, all the ingredients are there. All those stats suggest everything should be functioning rather well, or as well as it can be. But it's actually got worse. Yeah,
it should be on paper, but again, 40% of crime is online and fraud. Your average officer doesn't have the time to investigate, go to the banking institutions to do with the cybercrime because they're too busy dealing with the volumes of crime out there. It's massive. It's a huge drain on society when we need to investigate people. Lots of the finance institutions do 9 to 5 hours. Policing is 24/7. So we need more investment, more time to do with that, and the skills and the training, protected learning, mandated time so that my colleagues get an updates on laws, powers, policies, procedures, but also how to investigate online fraud. Because it's not quick. It's not like in a Hollywood film where it happens in an hour. Some of these things take weeks, months, years to progress. Crime's going up, and also if you change the crime reporting figures, you're going to get a difference in what happens from one year to the next.
Home Secretary, we have about 5 minutes left with you.
Can I just respond very quickly?
Please do.
It's a really important one that Steve's made. What I think we also have to remember is that whilst we've made this landmark agreement, and it will take some time for, I've challenged the police to make this agreement expressly. They've accepted that challenge, and we made that announcement at the end of the summer. They now have to operationalise it on the ground. So that's probably why it hasn't happened for you when your crime occurred. But I'm expecting all police officers to, be good for their word and hold true to the promise that they've made the British people and they've made me. But what I think is the very necessary flip side of this coin is whilst we're expecting the police to follow every reasonable line of inquiry, we are also going to be freeing up considerable amounts of police time. Through our reforms to the Home Office counting rules, we'll be saving 400,000 police hours a year. That's police hours that will be devoted and should be devoted to following up the CCTV, to following up the evidence of a robbery or a burglary. And with the right care, right person model from Humberside, we have evidence of the time and resource that saves. In Humberside, right care, right person on the mental health model that I set out in my speech, that saved Humberside Police 1,400 hours per month. And we estimate now, with that being rolled out nationwide, that will save 1 million hours a year. 1 million hours of police time free to be focused on following up every reasonable line of inquiry can be what makes the difference to restoring public confidence in the police.
Here's another question. What is your view on the recent declaration from a small number of chiefs that they consider their force to be institutionally racist? We have seen this in lots of different areas of life. Some would perhaps rather cynically say it seems to be a bit of a thing, the self-flagellating nature of life as it is. We're institutionally racist, misogynist, sexist. Steve addressed it in his speech very well, I thought. What is your comment on that, Home Secretary?
I don't believe the term is a useful one or an accurate one. And it's not a term that I use when describing the police. I don't think it helps with building confidence amongst communities. I think it has a disempowering effect on the police at a time when we need to empower our police. And it also suggests that everyone in an organisation is racist or misogynist or homophobic. And I simply do not see that to be true. And so it's not a term that I find helpful or accurate.
And Steve, you alluded to it in the speech there, and quite accurately and correctly made the point that, you know, we are talking about such a minority of staff within the police service. The remainder feel, you know, somewhat maligned, understandably, when these phrases, often by the press, are thrown out there willy-nilly. It's become, as I said, a bit of a thing. We are institutionally racist, something we read all the time now.
We have, but don't forget, these are the terms that have been given labelled for policing by external people that report on policing, the activities of policing, and it's what the communities we serve. If you look at the attestation of a police officer, you know, to serve without fear or favour or to the prejudice to the rights of others, we are there to be impartial to do our job. We will only get rid of that label if the public, the communities we are there to serve and protect and look after, tell us we have got rid of that and we do our job properly. And it is an incredibly small minority that spoil it for the vast overwhelming majority, but these are the labels that mean so much to the communities that we are there to help.
And on that point, Home Secretary, we finish. Much to your delight, I'm sure, we come to the end of this session. Thank you for your time. Just one final message from you, if you would, to serving officers, to Federation members. What's the overarching view or opinion you'd like to put out there as a final point?
Well, thank you, Ian. And I think Steve and I have ended on a point of agreement as well. So in relation to the last question that you asked. Listen, as I've said, and I continue to say, and I will fearlessly continue to maintain, the police do a noble job. Without them, our society would be very, very different. And it takes courage, it takes bravery, and it takes dedication and a huge amount of skill to wear the police badge day in, day out. It is a privilege to serve. But moreover, it's my job and it's my privilege to back you, to empower you to do the best that you can do for the British people, so that you can protect them and so that you can serve them to the best of your ability. I'm here to champion the police, to back the police, to empower the police. I'm here also to challenge the police when necessary and urge better performance, better delivery of service, and better standards. And I know that as we continue working together, we can achieve excellence and a good service for the public.
Home Secretary, thank you.